So good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to Performance Under Pressure in Sports, Business, and Life, and featuring Dr. Nick Molinaro, Paul Peterson, and Paige Mullhausen. We have a great, interesting show for tonight, and I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for getting on and supporting what Centercourt 360 is about. First, about community, and then it's about teaching people the full 360 concept to life. And it is an incredible program that has just been kicking off during these unprecedented times. And we do appreciate everybody for coming on and joining us as we all look to help ourselves perform better. So tonight's event is very interesting in the fact that Dr. Nick Molinaro, renowned sports psychologist, has really opened the door for an interesting way to look at how to perform in sports, business, and life. We look at sports, business, and life, and some of the things we don't always realize is that, especially when it comes to sports, sports is 80% mental and 20% physical. We put so much emphasis on skill sets and timing and how fast you're running the 40-yard dash, what's your exit velocity in your baseball swing, how quickly can you get down the baseline, how fast can you throw a lacrosse ball, and we put all those sorts of physical traits together and we think we can capture a player. We think when we're talking about recruitment that's my ideal player. I only look at individuals who are 6'2", 210 pounds, run a 4.3 and a 40-yard dash, or have an exit velocity of 101 miles an hour in baseball, and they are going to come on my team and perform. Well, I bet you Dr. Nick Molinaro will probably say somewhere along the lines tonight, like, hold up that thought for one quick second, and let's discuss how important that is versus the mental approach to performance under pressure. We'll also have the chance to think about the work environment, the business environment, where we look at resumes constantly when we're evaluating and looking to build a team for our business. We look at someone's resume, where they went to school, what other job titles they had before, what their GPA may have been. And we look at those as factors of whether or not they're going to perform within your organization. But with all that information and knowledge, with all that schooling they may have, what happens when it really hits the fan? What happens when you direct and guide and pivot in your business and the pressure is now mounted? Are they going to perform? Do they have the traits, innate traits, to perform under that pressure at the same time, in using those skill sets that they have on their resume, the same exact way? Can that guy really run that 4.2 40 on the field the day of the game, when the game is on the line and they know the ball is coming to them? Some can and some can't. I want to first introduce our first guest, Paige Mullhausen. Paige is from the beautiful state of Maryland. And Paige is a wellness advisor, and she specializes in young women. She taught preschool education and eventually started her first business. She opened a daycare center where preschool, nursery school were provided. Paige created a curriculum where building self-esteem, character, and sprinkling kindness was integrated into every day. As the founder of One Village Center, located in Maryland, Paige's goals are to heal those who need help by providing the tools to improve their overall quality of life, by reaching as many people as possible and helping them live their best lives. Some of the things that her wellness center has is they offer counselors, nutritionists, life coaches, acupuncturists, a wellness health club, which includes yoga, meditation, massage therapy classes, and theme-related events. But one of the amazing things that Paige has accomplished is that she's been a high school and youth coach for over 30 years, specializing in field hockey and basketball. And it's changed the lives of many, many young women in the state of Maryland. So we're very happy and honored to have Paige on today.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome, Paige. Great to have you here. And we have Paul Peterson. Paul's a managing partner at WIS, which is a major accounting firm that manages the business of many Fortune 500 companies. He's led the firm's long-term strategy and helps cultivate an environment where their people can flourish in servicing their clients. Paul's always enjoyed the entrepreneurial and dynamic spirit and a close relationship that forms with servicing privately held companies and family businesses. He has extensive experience providing accounting, auditing, and tax services to a variety of businesses and advising clients on growth, personal growth strategy, succession planning, financing, and organizational structure. He's a graduate of Seton Hall University in the Stern School of Business at New York University, and Paul is a certified public accountant. It's great to have Paul here also, and not to mention off his resume, he also has an extensive knowledge of sports. So all you sports people on here today, you are getting not just a bean counter, but someone that understands sports as well.
Huge avid fan. Thank you very much. Great intro. Thanks, Stephen.
Great to have you. And last but not least, the person of the hour here, and why many of us are listening today, is to hear the words of renowned Dr. Nick Molinaro. Dr. Molinaro is a licensed psychologist who specializes in counseling, human development, and sports performance psychology. Additionally, Dr. Nick is a corporate consultant in talent acquisition, retention, executive performance, and development. Dr. Nick currently works in the area of performance psychology with middle school children through the ranks of professional and Olympic level athletes in all sports. Now, here's what everybody wants to hear. Clients include players in the NFL, CFL, NBA, NASCAR, PGA, LPGA, and former Olympic and silver gold medal winners at the Olympic Games. Dr. Nick also works with a variety of NCAA teams as their sports psychologist. So on here today to answer a lot of our questions and carry this conversation, Dr. Nick Molinaro. Thank you, Dr. Molinaro, for being on today.
Thanks, Stephen, for the great introduction. Appreciate being here.
It is definitely well-deserved. So let's get into the conversation here. And one of the things that I love about this presentation here is the fact that there's that ability to unlock this myth of performance and why some people do it and some people don't. And also, hey, are there ways for us to determine that million-dollar question? When I bring this person in, when I recruit this athlete, when I sign that contract with this individual, are they going to actually perform when they need to perform? And are they going to be valuable? And where do I put these people in my puzzle? How do I objectively place them into the roles that I need them to be in? And I want to start off by chatting with Paul. Paul, you've done an amazing job building the talent pool within your organization. And obviously your partners and your stockholders have appointed you to sort of really figure out how do we bring the very best people on board our company. What's important to you when you're looking at bringing people on board your organization? What type of traits are really important to you? Forget the resume, but what do you look at when you start figuring out who are we going to bring on our team?
Yeah, so our culture is so important for us. I mean, I think that's our secret sauce, if you will. We look at it as the number one thing we really look for is a person's ability to get along with others. So I think we really want to find the right fit, I would say, and not everybody's always the right fit. And when they're not the right fit, it is really, really difficult to potentially correct the situation or to undo a toxic situation. So we do spend a lot of time making sure that the individual has a personality and a spirit of wanting to give and wanting to be part of a team. So that's a real important quality for us. The other is in this day and age, you need to be resourceful. A lot gets thrown at us, the ability to adapt and to figure things out. So one of the things we like to call it intellectual curiosity, so that there's this desire to always want to learn and grow. And the last piece I would say is awareness. Do they have a keen insight on not just how others are doing, but internally, are they evaluating and are they open to feedback? So are they aware and are they willing to be aware? So those are some of the things that we really look for, and we're lucky we could turn to Dr. Nick sometimes as well to help us evaluate that. So that's a really important.
So Paul, Dr. Nick helps your organization out through the use of not just his psychologist-based background, but also an interesting test called not a test, but an interesting sequence called TAIS.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the usage of TAIS has helped you in this evaluation process?
Oh, it's been huge. It's a game changer. So a few years ago, we started using the TAIS in some of our selective hiring. So it wasn't even widely adopted at first, but there was a strong correlation. All of a sudden, we started realizing that wow, this works. It's almost like we almost thought it was like sorcery, because we started out with each of us taking the test, and those that are honest and looking at like how it's scored and meeting with Dr. Nick one-on-one and getting the feedback, we were able to ascertain that this thing this works. I mean, so it had a good read on us, and that was our first step, was just being able to understand each other and on the team how it works, and what we saw that potentially is working for those that are doing well. So we started to look at certain factors that come up on the test to correlate. And one of the things that I would say that the test does, which you nailed it in the beginning, Stephen, just in terms of, we look at bringing in people the same way as though we're in sports, that they could have all of they could run a great 40, they could be in great shape, all of that. But, how do you find that all out to when there is pressure, and are they going to perform, and how do we become more objective? Because without the test, all of our hiring decisions were subjective. So you're just relying on intuition, and intuition is real important. You don't want to underestimate the strength that you have intuitively, but when you pair the intuition up with the TAIS, that's powerful.
So not to cut you off, Paul, but how long have we been messing this whole thing up? We're just looking at resumes and going on intuition. How many bad hires have we made?
Way too many.
And I want to hold that thought, because I want to ask Dr. Nick here, how does the TAIS program, Dr. Nick, and what you do when you're working with an organization like Paul, the same way you'd work with a sports team, now transfer into business, and he starts talking about intellectual curiosity, awareness. How are you using that TAIS evaluation to help somebody like Paul truly identify these particular traits in people, so that then you can relay that information over to him so he doesn't have to use blind intuition?
Well, the test actually measures 20 mental skills. Most people don't know that we have 20 mental skills. And it's all around two basic processes about where's your attention at the time you're making your decisions, and a very specific style. There's a process about the way you make decisions. So if I'm working with someone who's a CEO, that might be different than someone who is an accountant on a staff level. So we can assess their cognitive processes, where their attention is, the sequence of what they do, and whether or not they will adapt to new situations, whether or not they'll be a team player, whether or not they have the potentials even get to a higher level, like perhaps even becoming a partner. So we measure all those processes. We can also tell whether or not people are telling us the truth. And we've saved, I I think, WIS on a couple of occasions.
From more than a couple.
More than a couple of occasions about what decisions were going to be made, I think, by even partners about candidates, and I could pick something up that was telling me that they weren't being authentic. So the TAIS is very well established, has a very long history in Fortune 500 companies in being able to predict this. There are prognostic indicators, things like emotional regulations, things like frustration, tolerance, or anger, or distractibility, or even the way in which you manage others, or whether or not you're going to be a team player. We can assess all of those. And we do this at sometimes, right, Paul, even before you'll interview people, we'll say, let's take a look at these candidates. And I don't think anyone's hired by your company, even as an intern, without going through the process.
No, it's soup to nuts now. Yep.
So, Dr. Nick, talk a little bit about frustration tolerance. What is frustration tolerance? What does that mean in layman's terms, so it's not 3 layers above our head here? What is frustration tolerance?
Well, it tells us how much stress it would take for a person to actually lose their ability to focus or their ability to maintain control over their frustration. So if the tolerance is higher, we know that under pressure, they're going to perform at a higher level. If their frustration tolerance is lower, it won't take them long before that is going to occur. So you can see what's going to happen when pressure occurs. So if we look at tax season, I think there's a little pressure under tax season, right, Paul?
Yeah.
So I think that we're going to be able to assess those individuals during that period of time. Who are the people that are going to be able to maintain their focus? It's not only the stress that's going on at work, but it's, stress tolerance that we're looking at throughout the person's entire life. Clearly, what's going on now would be another factor.
So let's make this comparison, if you can, Dr. Nick, regarding, let's stick to that frustration tolerance. So the 2 applicants for a major CEO role, they both one went to Harvard Business School, one went to Wharton. They both had the same track record, coming up through the ranks. They both have the knowledge in that particular field. And one has a certain score of frustration tolerance and one has another one. How are you then weighing that out? And what's that differentiating factor when one has a different score? Kind of play that out for us as to how you can almost guarantee someone's reaction versus another one's reaction or their performance during a tough time in a company.
Well, certainly we would look at frustration tolerance, but it wouldn't be the only factor. So we'd be looking at that, in terms of, there's a cadre of things that we put together. So I will look for maybe, out of the 20, I'll look for maybe 5 or 7 of them. So if there's a low frustration tolerance, but they're open-minded, that might make a big difference because it means that they would be more able to adapt. So in spite of the fact that might be the case, we would look at other factors that might influence that differently. So we put all of these pieces together. We wouldn't probably make a decision. I won't make a decision on one score only. Certainly I have individuals in my mind where their frustration tolerance was very low because of all the factors of their responsibility. It was a global responsibility, but they were very open-minded. That they could delegate responsibilities effectively. So in spite of the fact that frustration might occur, frustration can lead to inspiration. And that was told to me by a professional athlete when we were working on his frustration tolerance. It was low frustration tolerance with this young man. But over a period of time, we actually found that he used his frustration to come to a resolution. So we won't just use one specific score, we'll put it into the context of the overall performance.
So during a time like this, during the pandemic, and what key performance-based traits would you say, and I'll put you on the spot a little bit here, Dr. Nick, but only doing it because I know you know this stuff so well. We're looking at a business going through the pandemic that has to survive coming out. What key types of personality or key performance traits that they would have that you would know that there is a higher percentage of that individual being able to lead that group through this pandemic time?
I'd be looking at someone who is really kind of flexible and adaptable, and so we would call this cognitive flexibility. We'd be looking at for people that are utilizing resources like their intuition. So it's not just what you're doing with the analytics. We would look for people that want to be in a position of leading people in a sense of belonging. And belonging is a huge component to high level of functioning. Belonging actually reduces the impact that stress has on your immunological system. So I'd be looking at factors such as those that are showing up in the assessment, and we'll be able to predict. These are what's called prognostic indicators. We can see how well these individuals will do based upon some of those scores. So frustration tolerance would only be one part of that. But we'd be looking at those kinds of things like adaptability, risk-taking, reasonable risk-taking. We don't want someone who's averse to risk-taking at a time like this in leadership.
So I'm going to switch over to Paige here. Paige, you've been coaching for 30 years. If you had the opportunity, knowing that you've gone through the TAIS evaluation, what kind of puzzle pieces would you put together if you had to sort of figure out, hey, I want to develop a great team? What kind of traits, key traits, would you sort of place in there to know that you would have this great, well-rounded team that would support a championship type of run? What type of traits do you look for there?
Yeah, well, one thing that definitely stood out to me is I'm a really big believer in understanding the athlete. Not every athlete is exactly like the next athlete that came in. So, before, this even existed to me, which was just a week ago, you took the time to understand that athlete and, not treated every athlete as the same. Now, this actually gives us a better dive into that person to understand exactly how we could utilize them, on the field, and have a better understanding of just, who they are, as a person. We say athletes are, of course they're people, and being able to, push them to their limits, understanding this test, we really know exactly how, to use them.
So just like Paul would in his evaluation of individuals inside a company, that, yes, they have a particular job title, but they're also people, right? So things happen in their life. They have a past. These things all have to come in consideration. The same thing that you're saying here, Paige, that, your athletes all have certain things that are going on with them, right? That affects their performance level. And as a great coach, the ability to use a program like TAIS to determine what type of predictive measures you can use to help acknowledge some of these traits that almost can predict certain things that could happen. Now, let's say and I'm going to flow Dr. Nick in here. Dr. Nick, let's say Paige has an athlete that is going through a tough time during their season or preseason. And there are things that are going on in their life that's causing them to, what we call in sports, go through a slump, right? How, in your process of working with, whether it's Paige as a coach or as an individual, how does a TAIS type curriculum help you evaluate that individual and then help bring them through that process so they can get out of that slump-based mindset?
Well, first of all, we'll take a look at factors that are going to influence slump-based process. So things like emotional regulation or anxiety thresholds. So we'd be looking at that. We'd be looking at how coachable they are. We'd be looking at how open-minded they are and how other-directed and how much they want to be a team member. So we certainly look for, factors. We can look at allegiance, as an example. Having worked with some pretty powerful national teams, and helping the coaches understand that you have to coach players differently. based upon their makeup of these kinds of factors that we're able to assess. So someone who has a low threshold, to frustration, a coach yelling at that player will not be effective, even if he's a star player. So we need to help the coach understand, and I've been fortunate to have coaches employ me just to work with them, and it's not even the university paying for it because they want to understand how to relate to their players more effectively. So the TAIS will give the coach the tools to understand those factors about where their attention is during pressure points. Now, you can imagine if I could go into the coach and say, Coach, this is what the player is going to do. And the coach now knows that, and he brings it back to the player and said, well, I know Dr. Nick's spoken with you about that, and we know that this is the case. I now understand that. And now the coach is speaking the player's language, and the coach has been coached by me and the player's been coached by me. And so now that's a dynamic that's not going to happen in many, situations. Fortunately, clearly what's going on at Centercourt, is you offer the opportunity for coaches, parents, and players to learn about the system and learn some of the skills that we're going to teach both the coaches and parents as well as players.
I think we saw some of that. If anybody has been watching the Jordan Chronicles of the Last Dance and how Phil Jackson reacted to Dennis Rodman. I mean, that clearly comes in there, Dr. Nick. Can you comment on something like that? What was, whether Phil Jackson was trained or his general intuition? I'm sure that's a trait of his, but what is that allowed a coach to see Michael is one, Scotty's someone else, and Dennis is something different?
Well, I don't know Phil personally, but I know some of the training that he did go through. So Phil Jackson used some of the same types of philosophy that he used, which is not necessarily TAIS-based. So in other words, I could make the diagnosis, but Phil and I both use Asian philosophy, Chinese philosophy. And so that kind of approach that he's using is integrated. So not only do we take the assessment here, and then we teach very specific schools, very specific tools. So like mindfulness, certainly I'll even use hypnosis, and we'll use restructuring of thinking, critical thinking, emotional regulation, breathing techniques. But the way we get to those techniques is being able to assess these conditions in the first place.
So not everybody's lucky to have someone like Paige as their coach or someone like Paul is running their organization. And sometimes, what do you say to that 17, 18-year-old that you're working with? And you're bringing them through a tough time, whether it's a tough time of life situations or a tough time on the field, they're having that block, right? They can't get through that block, and you're working with them, and some of it is based upon how their coach is communicating with them. However, they're not lucky enough to have their coach go through a TAIS or have you at the disposal. What's a way for that young athlete that would be working with you? How are they now communicating with that coach so that they can strategically sort of nudge that coach to acknowledge the fact that, hey, coach, that style of screaming at me is just not working. I'm sorry. It's killing me, coach. How do they do that?
Well, unfortunately, most players, when they come up to coaches that are like that, they won't have those discussions with them. And so they won't even tell their coaches that they're seeing me. So a lot of players won't tell coaches because some coaches don't believe in what we're doing. So in that case, I'm working on self-reliance anyway. Well, certainly I want them to be respectful, listen to what the coach has to say, but I'm going to teach them how to direct their attention, not away from what the coach is saying, but in maybe the system, if he's handling things in a very, aggressive or frustrating way for the athlete. So I'll teach them to compartmentalize their emotional reactions and use the skill set. So I'll take a coach's explanation about how to do a very specific, task. I won't go against what a coach is saying there, but I'll just teach the player how to utilize that information differently. Now, as I say, some coaches want to be able to be educated in this and ask my opinion, but players are in a very tough position. There's sometimes discomfort in trying to have their parents understand because they're concerned that the parents will go to the coach then. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at the system of how the athlete will learn best, how the student will learn best, and teach them how to utilize those resources. And sometimes they may have to do that independently of what the coach is saying to them.
So Paul, how have you used this? Your opportunity to go through this work personally with Dr. Nick, how has this knowledge helped you move through the design phase of bringing on a new team of individuals or working with the current ones that you have? How is the knowledge of TAIS and just the general understanding of that helped you build your team and then get your team to perform at optimal levels?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that was a real important piece to this was spending time with Dr. Nick to understand some of the things that, we do well. And when we look at sort of the team, also what role we're playing in. And if we're not playing in the right role based on what strengths we have, maybe we should consider moving each other around a little bit so we are focusing more on our strengths, but also looking at maybe we have some blind spots that we really weren't aware of. One for me, and it's the other thing I would say about the test, it is this whole thing is it's not static, right? So you could take the test 2 years ago and go through the process with Dr. Nick, where you can work on some characteristics that maybe you need to be more aware of, or that you need to adjust ways of which you've been interpreting and behaving. So when you retake the test, you'll find that did I improve or not? And one of the things that was interesting even in mine personally is that my risk tolerance was going down, which is not great. So I just think, and it was something that I didn't, I wasn't aware of it consciously, but once it was brought to my attention from Dr. Nick, I was able to start to factor that into the decision-making process. And when all of a sudden that conservative edge may come in, you're realizing where that place may be coming from, right? And so there's other things in your life that may be impacting that. So I think for us, it was such an important tool to get to know each other more and how to position us best so that we're doing the best we can for the team based on what we're really almost designed to be doing.
So interesting you say that. And you mentioned the fact that your risk factor was getting lower as time went on. So this brings up an interesting point. Dr. Nick, can you actually train these traits once they're identified as factors in performance? Can you actually raise Paul's risk factor if needed to perform at his job at that time? Can you help him raise that risk factor or tolerance?
So the answer to that in one word would be yes. Now, there are factors that influence that. So let's say if there's low frustration tolerance, high anxiety, taking risks now might not be the best thing to do. It would be not an easy thing to do with some of those other factors interfering. So we have to manipulate other factors. We don't just go right after risk because there's a system. And when you see the analysis of this, I'm looking at 5 or 7 components and saying, well, before we do this, we have to do that. So just telling someone to perform at a high level doesn't work. You may even know that you're making an error. So for example, people will score high on confidence, which I'd spend a lot of time telling you why it's not a good factor to look at. And I'm sure anybody who's played golf has been over a 3-foot putt and they're confident. I know there's golfers listening and they've missed the 3-foot putt. Now, they may have missed that because I could predict that under pressure, their confidence isn't going to be what they're paying attention to. Their anxiety is. So can you be conscious and anxious at this, confident and anxious at the same time? Yes. So that's why I won't pay attention to confidence, I'll pay attention to anxiety. So before we get into risk taking, in the analysis, we would have to go back and take a look at 3, 4, 5, maybe even 7 components and look how they're each influencing one another. So there's an art to this. I mean, certainly it's data driven, but there's an art to this. I mean, medicine is an art and a science, right? And so psychology is very much the same way. So that's what we have to do is look at all these components, how they're interacting, and moving one before you're ready to do that will produce a nightmare.
So how much does it make you want to pull your hair out when you hear a baseball coach or a baseball athlete go into a slump, and the first thing that the baseball coach does is change the batter's swing?
Yeah. Well, I'm not always fortunate enough to be, with the coaches to help them understand this. So in the analysis, we're looking at where their attention is. And so one of the things is about in sport, as you know, with your career, and in business with your career, is you never master the basic skills of a sport. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for coaches. And so all high-level coaches, all high-level players are being coached throughout their entire career. And even Fortune 500 execs are being coached by people like myself. So the point is that we don't start changing those things. We have to look at the basics. And so if we're looking at risk-taking as one of the basic factors of high-level performance, we don't just say, let's make you become risky. We have to now take a look at those other factors. I would say the same thing, to the baseball coach. What are the factors that are influencing it? So what if it's not about the swing? What if it's about being distracted? And what if the distraction is based upon things going on in the rest of your life? And what if it's about you not being able to manage emotions? Your emotions and your anxiety, as a good example, will tighten the muscles up. So you can teach the guy a new swing, but if those muscles are being affected by factors such as anxiety or risk-taking, and now mentally and physiologically that's influencing the speed of the electrical conduction from your brain to your muscles, why don't we pay attention to that first?
So interesting. So as you're speaking about that, Doctor, I'm thinking about that tennis player, that young tennis player who has amazing running skills. And then you have the other tennis player that you look at, you're like, okay, not the greatest looking athlete in the world. However, that one kid gets to every single drop shot, but the one that can run like a gazelle just can't seem to get there. So would you say that you would be able to somehow predict or analyze why the one without the great athletic skills is getting that drop shot, and the one that has lightning Usain Bolt type speed can't get to it?
Sure. I mean, what we're looking at here is, in a simple way, is where is your attention at the time of execution? And what are the steps that you're going through? High-level performance is mostly influenced by the subconscious process. The minute your conscious mind interrupts that, which is under pressure, things will change. And electrical conductions, the activity from the brain to the muscles will change. And so in spite of the fact that the athlete has the potential, these other factors will interfere with that potential. Absolutely.
Can the same thing be used, take Paul, for instance, on the individual in the office that has that high skill level set, but just can't seem to get the reports right, or read the reports right, or communicate with the employee, with the client properly?
Sure.
Paul, have you seen that as you understanding the TAIS and being able to help guide someone through that process?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's great about including Dr. Nick in that process is it allows for, because one of the challenges we have is when you're combining pressure, technical accuracy, and being able to be communicative and doing it in a graceful way when there is pressure and you may be conveying bad news. Those attributes have a skill set in each of its own right. So you have to really, it's tough to find that person that could do well on all three of those dimensions. But when we find that somebody may be struggling with, let's say, being able to continue to be approachable under pressure, to also continue to lead, even though they have a lot of requests or demands from clients, the way in which we're able to include Dr. Nick in that process is they could meet with Dr. Nick one-on-one without me or anyone else in a very trusting way, which helps them work on some of the things that maybe they could be more vulnerable in that trustworthy setting. And that in turn has really helped me because as they go through this process, they'll even sometimes Dr. Nick will say, hey, let's all three of us sit down and, you know, here's what we've been working on and here's the progress we're making. So that's been really, I would say, one of the biggest helps has been also having someone to help you. We call Dr. Nick our Yoda, by the way, so that you have the Jedi Master along with you, because we're learning. You know, we're really trying to learn along with the individual and with Dr. Nick. So we're all trying to increase our level of understanding.
What an interesting point you make there. We are all trying to learn along with the individual.
Yeah.
Learn the process that they're going through to maximize their performance. Paul, what would you tell any of the individuals listening today, whether or not they're business owners of one or two people or they're managing a group of 30, what would you tell them about your experiences and how important what Dr. Nick does can be for their organization or for themselves personally?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is becoming vulnerable. That was something that I had to work on. And because you are going to, this test, it opens up from what's behind the curtains, let's say. So you have to go into that with that vulnerability and willingness to almost lead the way. So for those that are, you know, in charge of, you know, this initiative and, you know, and want to evoke change and a different way of going about things, they have to put themselves first into that position, almost like, hey, I took the TAIS, let's go through it together. You know, and here's what we're working on with Dr. Nick. So that's a real important element to this, is really being, putting yourself out there and being comfortable with that. And being okay with feedback. If there was one thing, even with my own development, I wish I changed early on, was not wanting to hear so much about what I'm doing well, but what am I not doing well, and give it to me straight. And if you can't tell me here, why don't you put it on this piece of paper and I'll walk out of the room, you know? That would be, and that's what the TAIS has helped, you know, it gives you that, that feedback that, you know, a lot of people are afraid to maybe tell you.
I was going to ask you that, Paul. What is something, you know, you've had a lot of success in your life, and sometimes what inspires people is to hear from people that have had success and are at a good point in life as to, you know, some of the things that they maybe uncovered about themselves. What were some of your vulnerable points that you uncovered because of Dr. Nick's help, that you had that aha moment that made you a better person or a better business person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I have failed more than I have succeeded. So that's, you know, I've made way more mistakes. You know, the biggest thing for me, honestly, is I suffered from anxiety. I had tremendous trouble with anxiety in my young 30s. And, you know, I didn't even know what I was dealing with, which was scary because you know, and during that time, even though I found out later my father had it, but he never told any of us. But, you know, so I think having the group understand that I had gone through that experience and could relate, and also have a tendency to potentially have an episode. You know, that was an important element for me, and getting a greater sense of understanding from the team. So
that's really powerful. What can you say? Now I want to move over to Paige here. Anxiety is such a challenge today, and a lot of young people and overall, young athletes, young non-athletes. What is something you can say? And then Dr. Nick, I'd love for you to chime in after. What's something you can say to that young individual that suffers from anxiety, to small levels, to high levels, whether or not they've spoken about it in public to their parents or to someone like Dr. Nick? What can you say to them to sort of open their eyes and open their minds a little bit?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And why I love that we're talking about it is because we're finally talking about it. For so long, people suffered within, didn't understand why they feel this way inside their body, why it was, you know, they can't hear the coach talk or their teacher talk because of, you know, what's going on within them. And, you know, anxiety looks different for so many different people, but if we keep talking about it, you know, it kind of puts it out there. So the first thing I would love to say is that you're not alone. You know, I have anxiety. Paul shared he's got anxiety. I mean, we all, you know, there's so many of us that has either a little bit of it or you know, suffer from it. And I think that's the first step, is just talking about it, letting people know that you're not alone, and you know, there's help out there. And that's what's really cool about Dr. Nick. And, you know, as we're talking, I feel like jumping out of my skin right now, because I feel like, gosh, I'm a mom of 4. I want my kids to take this test. You know, I think in general, it's just such a great way to help understand individuals, you know, whether, you know, a student, an athlete, a coach, you know, gosh, it's huge. I had the privilege of being able to take it, and I was like kind of questioning how my kids would have answered. It just helps us to be able to dive in and understand the athlete, so we know how to better train them, and that's just a phenomenal way. I would actually like to see more coaches do this. So I think there's a lot of coaching out there that needs to be more instructed to help each athlete. So, you know, what we had talked about before, there isn't the yelling, there isn't, you know, again, with the anxiety, it kind of helps, you know, that child or that, you know, adult perform the best way they can if we know the type of person they are.
So Paige, you've been able to work with hundreds of young women and girls in sport, and you speak about anxiety. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see in young female athletes today that pushes that anxiety barometer to levels of never before? And Dr. Nick, I'll have you chime in after that. What have you seen as some of the main origins of that when it comes to females?
You know, again, it looks different for everyone. You know, sometimes it is just our makeup, you know, their moms and dads, you know, the apple doesn't always fall far from the tree. So sometimes it's just, you know, a genetic, you know, sometimes it's what's going on at home. Sometimes the athlete has got tons of classes going on. They got, you know, SATs coming, and, you know, we're headed into states, or, you know, there's a lot, you know, that's a tough question to answer because it looks different for everyone. Sure. But I think kind of as a coach, you know, I think we need to have that compassion that sometimes we don't know what's going on at home. We don't know what's going on in their class load. You know, we don't. So I feel it's up to the coach to take that time and not just bring that athlete onto the field and let's go, let's power through it. You know, I mean, I have said before, you know, what's nice about coming onto the field is that you kind of have some time to let things go. This is a time to focus on, you know, the sport that we're playing. Let's get rid of it. But, you know, that's only, you know, 2-3 hours a day. I think a good coach takes that extra time to start saying, you know, hey, you know, so-and-so, I see we're not, you know, you don't seem to be playing at your best. What's going on? You know, you just kind of become that coach that, you know, is that friend. You know, you're a psychiatrist, you wear a lot of hats as a coach, and it's to take the time, and it's not always just about the drills and winning and the game that we're getting ready to play tomorrow, but kind of break it down and see each player as an individual and recognize that, you know, not everybody, you know, is ready to give 100%. So you need to figure out ways to motivate and get to know, you know, each player.
So Dr. Nick, Paige here is a coach with a tremendous amount of passion, 30 years experience working with athletes of a variety of ages, involved in a wellness center that specializes in trying to help people get through tough times in their life. And she's still saying it's hard to identify. Can TAIS help identify certain traits that could lead to markers that help you predict that this individual may have some levels of anxiety that can build up over the course of time? And can you help sort of lower that risk level through the knowledge of TAIS?
Absolutely, you can identify anxiety. The issue is then a differential diagnosis. It's like there's 6 different forms. So just looking at the score of anxiety is not going to tell you that. And some people won't actually see the anxiety because it's not manifested physically. You won't pick that up, and so it's what's called cognitive anxiety. So yeah, to answer your question, yes. So for example, when in the game changer class that we're going to be beginning again next week, next series of that for 4 sessions, we'll do the testing for each individual. And then we'll be able to take a look at an example of what anxiety is. So if there are 15 people in class and 5 of them or 10 of them have anxiety, I'll be able to know some of that. Some people will deny that they have anxiety, and that'll tell me that they probably are anxious. So the test will tell me if they acknowledge it or if they don't acknowledge it, I'll know that the anxiety is there. Are there things that can be done? So there are different forms. So we look at what's called trait anxiety or state. Trait anxiety is an inborn predisposition. And studies show us that at the age of 11 months, we can tell which people might have that, which children might have that, and whether or not that's going to be developed as they get older. In state anxiety, that's the kind of anxiety that can change based upon the conditions. So some people might not have had experience with anxiety maybe up until, and I won't say that COVID would be responsible, but that there's been a building up of stress, and so now we see that. So once we find out that the anxiety is present, and then I start doing some further explanations and exploration into this, I'll have a better understanding about whether or not it's something that they'd be able to control or modify simply by thinking differently, and we give skills for that, or if there's something else physiologically that's causing that. So the answer is yes, we can see it. The answer is that I can't tell you just from that score what is going to happen until I find more information out. But as I work with individuals in the corporate setting, business, sports, or even in the military, we can then identify what has to take place in order for that to change.
So fascinating, Dr. Nick. So you're relaying that trait anxiety, 11 months old, can be somehow determined. How isn't every major university in the country looking at your testing to evaluate an athlete? And I know you work with Rutgers on the Rutgers golf team. Let's talk about recruiting a little bit. And I just want to touch athletically because we are Centercourt here. So let's hit athletically. With trait anxiety, can a coaching staff, as they're really digging into determining who they're going to bring on their team, can you determine these levels of trait anxiety and help a coach determine which athletes, based upon the system or the sport, which athletes may have more difficulty as time goes on? Because remember, we're always evaluating their physical traits or certain scores they may have, and we're using those as our predetermined levels of success. Can you use this type of evaluation to help organizations and teams recruit?
There's no doubt about that. I mean, clearly, the business setting, Paul's a good example. I've been fortunate to be with WIS for a number of years. But yeah, I'm working, with Fortune 500 companies in finance. We're looking at succession planning, at a global level for, a company. So yeah, it's used to do that. This is a true story. I consulted with a coach on a potential of a student transferring in from a major player in that sport. And when I evaluated him, told the coach, I said I was concerned about 3 very specific factors. He wrote them down. He called the coach where the student was transferring from, and he said, "What about X, Y, and Z?" And the coach said, "Yeah, how did you know that?" And he told him about the test, and I started talking to that coach as well. So the answer is yes. On the other side of that, so for athletes, because I have the ability to talk to a recruiting coach, students can't. And recruiting coaches ask me 2 very specific questions. What's the athlete like off the field, off the court, and what are their parents like? They can't see that. But what they're asking me is how they're going to be able to adapt. Are they going to be a team player? So yes, it's a very, very effective tool. And so I can represent the player when they're being recruited. And I can say, I'll be glad to call your coach. a team that's looking at you, and tell them what I know about your abilities. And all my athletes have a journal. This is a true story. That they kept a journal. This young man had been working with me since he was maybe in junior high school. And when he went for his official visit, he brought his journal and he said, "Coach, I'd like to show you what I've been working on." So coach looks it up and he said, "You've been working on these mental skills?" It was amazing. And so the kid went to that college, and I don't know that that was a game changer, but coaches don't know this about their players. So any of the players that I work with, I can provide that kind of summary, make a comment, to the recruiting coach, write a report, and help them understand about the mental skills. That coach is now going to be fortunate because they're going to know a lot more about that player. So yeah, we can identify these qualities. We can tell which kids are more at risk and help the coaches then develop them. And some coaches really like to hear this stuff.
So let's say a coach does ID a player. They love their physical traits. They love certain things about the athlete, but there is an issue with a predetermined trait of anxiety. Are you able to then work with that athlete, or say that athlete is told by that coach, "Hey, I'm concerned about your levels of anxiety." Can you then work with that athlete to help alter that trait a bit, even if it's a trait level of anxiety? Can you help reduce it so that they can reach another level of performance?
Sure. It's just like a predisposition. I mean, it's like color of hair, color of eye. You have certain factors that are going to influence your functioning, right? Currently, I'm working in an Ivy League school, and I work with one player on that team. And there's other sports psychologists at that university, but I've been asked to work with this one individual because of my expertise. So yes, we can do that, and we can work. And specifically, the athlete does have anxiety, and it is a trait anxiety. Yet he's been able to perform at a very high level. He'll be a national champ at some point in time. Yeah.
So before I ask another question to Dr. Nick, if anybody does have any questions, please pop them in the chat so we can review those and have Dr. Nick or Paul or Paige answer any of the questions you may have. Obviously, this is an open forum, and I want people to know and understand that. If there are any specific questions, please throw them away. Not throw them away, bring them onto the screen, not throw them away. Sorry about that. Paul, when you, what's something that you have learned that you can tell anybody listening that would sort of inspire them to go down the road, to open themselves up to having themselves evaluated by Dr. Nick, or bringing someone like Dr. Nick into their organization for work? What's something that you can say to inspire them, how valuable this has been to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, growth comes when you're uncomfortable. So I think that's something we all struggle with, is putting ourselves in these uncomfortable situations. And sometimes it's hard to face the truth about certain things about ourselves. But I think that's really where you grow. And again, I wish I had been tuned into a lot. And this is great that Centercourt is doing this. By the way, when Dr. Nick told me all about the program, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had that. So I think it's really just having that ability to put yourself in that uncomfortable spot and know that, yes, it's not going to feel good. And yes, it potentially is going to be painful, but those are the times where you're going to grow. And I think we're so sometimes afraid of what it feels like inside from that internal pain and struggle. But those are the times you look back and you're like, oh man, it was a dark period. It was tough, but I learned the most. So that's what I would say.
And then Paige, I mean, you've gone through this just recently, and I know it's been quite inspirational to you. So someone that may be listening now that Paul has been in it, has been deeply involved, and has adapted to the systems that TAIS has afforded them. You, someone that, just being able to observe it, but with all your prior experience, what type of aha moment was this for you?
For me, it was, I loved it. I mean, it was a great experience. Dr. Nick is such a sweet man to talk to. And for me, maybe it was part of my personality, but I loved hearing about me. I loved hearing, where I can succeed. Part of, our village is, and helping people live their best life. It's kind of this great way to kind of live your best life. Like, it gave me a lot of encouragement to, continue to do what I'm doing. It was awesome. I'm sad that I didn't do this, in my younger years of coaching. And as we're talking about the athletes, I want to see more coaches do this. I want the athletes to do this to bring it to the coaches. To me, it's such a waste for an athlete to do this and not feel they could share this with a coach. It's just a better way to help understand, the athlete, a coach to understand a little bit more from themselves, way they see the field, the way they can make quick, plays on, last minute calls and things like that. I think it was a great insight to me. I loved it. I walked out, honestly, I felt so good about myself and kind of gave me that encouragement to continue to do what I'm doing. I'm just sad I didn't do it, years ago. So I loved it.
Isn't it amazing that the feeling of uncovering things about yourself that, it's sort of a wonderful release. It's a euphoric feeling. And one of the most difficult things that we do, we always try to look to understand other people, but understanding ourselves is sometimes the most important thing that we can try to do, because when we understand ourselves, we open the door for us to understand other people and to have the openness and compassion to try to understand other people. And building a business, building a team is all about understanding the people that you're bringing around you or your team or bringing on board and determining their origin. I always like to say, what's their origin? How did they get here? What has affected them over the years? Mm-hmm. Dr. Nick, you've worked with athletes, young athletes of all levels and of all sports, from baseball, basketball, football, hockey, gymnastics, tennis, golf. I know it's hard because you wish you could come out and say some of these athletes' names, because it would really inspire some of the young people who are on here today. But obviously you can't do that. But what do you say to that young athlete that if they're on here today? Number one, I say, if you're a young athlete in high school or younger and you're listening to this today, I just want to say congratulations to you. Congratulations, because you are definitely one step ahead of your competition just by being on here today and taking the time out of your evening to listening to this. But Dr. Nick, walk through, that young athlete that, they think it's their skill level. They think they stink. They think they're not good enough, or they're not tall enough, or they're not fast enough, or all the mainstream thoughts come into our head. Or they just say, I'm stuck. I've got a block. I'm trying to do this dismount in gymnastics, and I can't do it. This is all over. I can't figure this out. What do you say to that young kid?
Well, first of all, you can't do anything you don't have the potential to do. So that if you've had opportunities and you've demonstrated that you have the potential, but maybe you kind of choke under pressure. So I always talk about, well, you haven't done it, not that you can't. So it's not about the ability, it's about the execution of that. So I always focus on execution, never focus on winning. I never focus on confidence. What athletes will learn, the best thing I can tell you is find something you do well. And if there are other parts of your performance that are not at your highest level, if you focus on the execution of one very specific thing, your performance will go up. I'll just take one more moment to give you the example. And this is about a high jumper who had jumped 5'2" in her senior year and 5'4" in her junior year. And she came to see me one day before the county championships because her coach wanted to speak with me about confidence. I said, we're not talking about confidence. So I looked at her video and she showed me that when she was trying to go over the high bar, she picked her head up, her butt dropped, the bar jumped off. I said, can you keep your head back? She said, yeah, so that's all you have to do. That's it. On the next 45 minutes, gave her imagery techniques. The next day she goes out, she jumps 5'6", 2 inches higher than a personal best, 4 inches higher than she had done in her senior year. This is all about where your attention is, and it's not about how you feel about how you're going to perform or how you feel about what your performance has been. It's always about where your attention is at times of execution. The skill set of shifting your attention to where it needs to be will make all the difference in your performance. That's one nugget I could give you, and that's one specific thing I can train.
So that the young kid that says, I can do it in practice, but I can't do it in a game. What is it?
It's what they actually believe, or it's what they're thinking. So I don't even know if it's a belief, but if it's a thought, it could easily become a belief. And that thought, and if I could show you what's happening with the brain, that thought will decrease your ability to relax your muscles, to increase speed, to reduce strength, and to impact agility. That one thought can do that. So when we teach them how to think differently, we'll change pathways in their brain, performance will go up remarkably.
So that
Dr. Nick, I'm sorry, Stephen. Dr. Nick, I just want to say that a testimonial. My son, who is a rising junior, just took the last session, and absolute game changer. I mean, I cannot encourage parents enough to reach out and ask me questions. Put some questions in the chat group. Read more about it on our website online. This class is a game changer. He's, a successful student, puts a lot of pressure on himself. And I watched Dr. Nick work magic with his tools. And it is, as Paige said, I wish I took it. And I have 3 other kids who are going to take it. It is amazing. So anyway, just had to give a little testimonial.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that real life perspective, because we see, Dr. Nick, we see so many people. I know we've gone over the hour, everybody, but Dr. Nick and Paige and Paul, they talk about such interesting parts of life and business and sports and things that we don't always have the time to sit and listen to this. And I think one of the benefits, if there are any, of going through this time in our life in this country is the fact that we can take a couple more moments and figure some things out that we've been sort of banging our heads against the wall about, or not recognizing in our children, or as an athlete, not really taking the time because our young lives move so quickly in and out of school and to practice and back to the books again and back to practice again and doing housework and everything else. We don't take the time to think about, hey, there are some finite things I can do to better my performance. Even if I can't get outside and play or play with my team right now, I can actually work on some of these things. So Dr. Nick, if maybe we can talk about that for a couple more minutes here about, how to use this time to get involved in the mental approach to changing your game and understanding, those areas of your life that need to work on. And you're saying we can work on some of those traits that we have. What can some of these kids do today, or some of us adults that have the time now to think about these things?
Well, your mind is responsible for almost everything you do, right? So we have about 80,000 thoughts a day. And the majority of those thoughts, when you're under pressure, are not very positive. But if you start creating images in your mind about your success, so in the moment, you can imagine, if you're an athlete, just moving a specific portion of your body. So if you're a runner, imagine what it feels like to push off with that foot, your right foot or left foot. If you're a baseball player, golfer, imagine what it feels like to swing the bat, swing the golf club. Now, as you're trying to have that sensation, your brain is firing to your muscles in real time. You can do that perfectly in your mind, in your brain, in your body, more than you can in physical execution. I'm not taking away practice. So during this period of time when you're not able to be competitive in a real sense, you can continue to exercise your mind-brain-body connection by having images, either imagining what a video camera would see if they were taking a video of your performance, or if it's what you might actually be experiencing. Or if you're a baseball player, from behind your eyes, what's it like when you see the ball coming at you? So we can use imagery and actually fire electrical activity from your brain to the muscles in real time, 100% more effectively than if you're actually practicing this physically.
Is that something that you can work with the athletes in the Game
Yes.
Changer course?
Yes.
With Centercourt 360?
Yes. So first, everybody takes the test. We debrief everybody so they know what their skills are. We set very specific goals up. We teach them how to do goal setting, and then we also teach them breathing techniques, imaginative techniques, and being able to modify their performances by looking at the very specific sequence of decision making. A golfer makes decisions differently than a quarterback does, than a lineman does. So yeah, so we become sports specific, and we become position specific. Absolutely.
Is your Game Changer course something that an athlete that may be listening today, or a parent, that they can get a couple of their athletes involved together and also learn about each other, so that let's say you just mentioned quarterback understands that lineman a little better, or that
Oh yeah.
you know, that even on a golf team where you may be playing against each other, but you know, as a team, you understand, you know, how to support that other team member, you know, while out there on the course, you know, to that soccer player about, you know, how to address or communicate with your goalie when there's a penalty kick on the pitch. And, you know, is it beneficial to maybe get a bunch of your players to do this together?
Well, I think it'll be great. I mean, I think that when you look at what we describe as understanding, first of all, it will affect allegiance of the team. It'll affect a sense of belonging, and it definitely will affect performance. So clearly, having worked at WIS with the opportunity to have Paul as a leader there, we've done that kind of thing in terms of team functioning as well, but certainly as athletes. So if you know that an athlete has a tendency to do one specific thing when they're under pressure, not only would you be supportive, but you're going to be able to observe that. And we can teach them what to look for, as I teach coaches to look for those things as well. Absolutely.
I have three more questions, and we'll wrap it up. And if there's no questions, we'll close it down. But I want to just go through the three of you, and I want to ask something, you know, specific and personal. Since all of you have been a part of this, what's one thing that you figured out about yourself by going through the TAIS process that you worked really hard to overcome, and how did it affect the other people around you and your performance at work? Paige, I'll start with you. What's something that you uncovered by speaking to Dr. Nick that's personal to you, that as a seasoned individual, you really didn't understand it before, and my goodness, and you're realizing this about yourself, and now you're taking action? And kind of tell everybody what it is and what you've done to take action on that.
Okay, so I've had about 24 hours to process kind of what Dr. Nick has shared with me. To be honest, it was really encouraging. I didn't necessarily walk away feeling I had to work on a lot of areas. I think the one major encouragement I got was that I probably underestimate myself sometimes, and that I really should speak up and share the ideas I have, you know, not necessarily on the field, because I'm definitely a big mouth on the field, but but kind of maybe speaking up a little bit more in certain areas. But I have to be honest, and Dr. Nick, since mine's probably fresh on your mind, please jump in at any time. But I think I walked away feeling really great. I walked away having a really good understanding. You know how sometimes you kind of second guess yourself? I walked away with saying, okay, you know, I want to live my best life. And that's kind of how I walked away. I'm sorry. I don't have like this deep rooted, what would you say, Dr. Nick? Help me.
Said a lot of it.
Save her, Dr. Nick.
Yeah, the one thing I would encourage you to work on is what we describe as self-reliance, and that there's a tendency to be so other-directed that at times, in spite of the fact that you have the answer to something, you'll be the last one to let anybody know that you actually have the answer.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's what I got to work on. That I always kind of feel like I want to hear everybody else's ideas. I love when we all kind of get together and collaborate. And sometimes I guess I listen a little bit more than I, you know, throw myself out there is kind of how I took it. So, but that's what's so cool about this, you know.
It's so fascinating to see with all the success that you've had, and then you get a chance to have some self-evaluation. Paul, toss back over to you. You know, what's what are those things that you discovered, and how have you grown yourself through that?
Yeah, no, I would say the biggest was my I would overanalyze. So being able to make, I knew the decision I was going to make anyway, you know. So it'd be like I would just go and spin it around and talking about it in circles, and you know, Dr. Nick would just be like, "Okay, Paul, like let's just go out there and do it," you know. So it really was, it definitely being more direct and trusting intuition. Honestly, it really was trusting more. I think the self-reliance is really, you know, just, you know, we have a lot more potential inside of us than a lot of us really believe, and he helps bring that out.
Well, clearly, I would say, and I know Paul very well for a good number of years. He's a musician, in addition to being an athlete and being, you know, gifted, you know, as a leader. And he's very analytical. And the people that are intuitive and people that have anxiety, you know, tend to be more intuitive and tend to be more creative. But because the anxiety can block the risk-taking of using the intuition. So Paul would spend a lot more time utilizing that process that he's really good at with analysis. So he's become a greater risk taker. His leadership is, and WIS is actually very fortunate to have him in a position of leadership, particularly with whom he replaced. But he's very intuitive and very compassionate.
You're too kind, but thank you. Yeah.
Speak the truth,
Stephen, this was Stephen, this was something that was really interesting. I said that I have anxiety. I do feel, you know, in times. It did not come up in my test, but he knew that because of kind of where my other test scores fell, that he knew that I had anxiety because of being creative and, you know, some other areas that he pointed that out to me, and I didn't put that down.
That's pretty
So
fantastic.
cool.
Dr. Nick, can you kind of, you know, kind of wrap that up with Paige of what you're able to identify with that? Maybe we'll sort of come to a close there after that. But what is it that you're able to identify, even though something doesn't come up on the results of an evaluation?
The test is so sensitive that it picks up patterns of behavior. So when there is an absence of several factors, the absence tells us that what is absent is really present. It's a crazy way to look this over. So the kind of the algorithm of what's missing is really present. And that's how we were able to pick that up. Scores, Paul's scores were very different. His were much more obvious. But when I looked over Paige's, and I think she was surprised, is that I think I said something like that. What is absent here tells me it's really present.
it's just hearing that what is absent is really present. How amazing this of an opportunity this can be for individuals in business, in sports, to have that sort of self-reflective evaluation, and how amazing that this is right here at Centercourt, and what Centercourt is offering in this methodology of this 360 person, this individual that truly can have an understanding of themselves, others, and their performance. And that's what makes somebody complete. That's what makes somebody perform. That's what makes someone be the very best versions of themselves. And I think that's where you have the greatest results in an organization, in a location, a demographic, at a facility. I mean, that's what's so special about what Centercourt is doing here now, is that it's not just about AstroTurf and domes and fields, right? Those are the physical sides of what we're looking at with performance, and how are we using these as tools to help guide our coaches and our young athletes so that they do truly start to understand themselves, so we start to affect change in our communities, in our societies, and whether that's about self-doubt and more self-awareness and awareness of others, caring more for others. These are all things that can be taught in this type of setting. And I think, it's amazing to see what Centercourt is doing here with 360, and how that evolves into making a complete person and end up being like Paul, like Paige, like Dr. Nick, and like some of the people who are on the webinar tonight. So I want to thank all of you for opening up tonight on tonight's call. Paige, and your Our Village Wellness Center, you've been moving mountains down there in Maryland, sometimes unnoticed by many people, of what you've been able to create. So thank you for being on board tonight, and for anybody to go, check out Our Village Wellness Center and see what Paige is doing, and the things that her team is accomplishing there, and the lives that have been impacted by her commitment to her sports and to her community. So thank you, Paige, for taking the time out tonight to express the feelings and for reviewing with us what you went through with Dr. Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Paul, it's been great to get to know you a little bit more, and there's no doubt why WIS has had such incredible success over these last years, and the things that you guys have been able to do to help other companies and organizations reach their employment goals, but also reach their financial goals, and the impact that you guys have had on so many other organizations. And you start figuring out those origins, right? You start figuring out the origins of why someone is like this, why someone is having success, why are so many businesses that are using WIS as a group, why are they having so much success? It's not just about counting, it's not just about numbers, it's about passing on a culture that obviously has been affected by some of the things that Dr. Nick has been doing and what you're doing. So thank you very much for opening up and sharing your experiences tonight with everybody, and showcasing a little bit of behind the scenes of what you guys have been doing to create greatness.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much. And you were great. So you made it easy. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Nick, it's always an honor. It's always a pleasure. So many people have been affected by your knowledge and inspired to learn from you. So we hope to continue this on 360, and to truly, at this stage, the backbone of what 360 and Centercourt can do to help better the lives of the community can be built on so much of the knowledge that you present. So much of the back end that you support of why we do things, or how things are done. So thank you for your continued support and knowledge that you bring to young people. And I want to say to anybody out there that's listening today, please reach out to Centercourt, to Tara, to Matt. Get yourself involved in Dr. Nick's program, whether it's your child or it's you personally or your business itself, or if you're a coach on the line, get your team involved. or inspire that coach that you know. Give that coach a call and say, Coach, we got to figure this stuff out. If we want to win this year, or we want to have success, reach out to Centercourt, and let's get involved here. So thank you, Dr. Nick, for always being such a back end supporter here. This has been great. I know it has changed, and this event's not about how this has affected me, that's for sure. But I just want to say, you know, I've been through your test, everybody, full disclosure as well, and it has truly impacted and changed the way I see things, both in myself and others, and it truly has helped me track back to why I've done certain things, why certain people have been in my life, why I've made certain mistakes, why maybe I haven't achieved certain things that I've been wanting to achieve, and what blocks are there that it's not because of the ability, but it's because of sometimes your mental approach to your life. So thank you, Dr. Nick. I hope everybody has had a great experience tonight. And Dr. Nick, if you want to close, we'll leave that to you.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is I truly mean this. I've consulted with many
organizations,
organizations, professional sports organizations, as well as national championship teams, collegiately. And what I like to say about Centercourt, I've never had the experience of working with an organization such as this, that there is a belief in all of what you're hearing, and that the kinds of things I'm doing is been integrated before I even got here. I mean, it's part of the staff. I can see that already. So it's a privilege and an honor to be here, and I hope to provide some more knowledge for your staff and for your players and anyone who's associated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.